Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and thanks to a leak about Diablo 4's revenue, we found out what percentage of the game's income comes from microtransactions, and the results may be surprising. We'll talk about that, but we'll also give my final feedback on Diablo 4 2.0 now that the PTR is over. We'll cover some grim industry news, but also some great Baldur's Gate 3 news that may just get developer Larian in trouble with their D&D overlords. But before we move on, a word from this video's sponsor, Boot.dev, who we've spoken about before. If you're interested in learning programming, be it as a hobby or as a profession, check this out. Boot.dev has gamified learning to code. They literally built an online programming course into a programming RPG. You complete quests, you gain experience, you level up, you earn achievements, and you can rank on a global leaderboard. And you can learn fully at your own pace. Boot.dev believes that the key to learning is to ensure you're never bored. With this program, you'll learn the programming languages Python and Go at your own pace. You're going to learn back-end web development from start to finish, and it's designed to get you to write a ton of code, since they believe that practice is the most important way to learn coding. And while programmers in the US can earn six-figure incomes, this isn't some get-rich-quick scheme. Boot.dev believes that you have to dive deep into mastering the fundamentals, and they want you to be as prepared as possible before you go job hunting. If you ever find yourself struggling, you can consult with Boots, an AI bear wizard that's been trained in every lesson and can walk you through your issues. He won't just give you the answers, he'll try to get you to grasp the concepts and find the solution yourself. But if you're ever really stuck, or you just want to compare your code to the instructor, there are solutions available for every challenge on the site. So click the link in the description box and use my code Rhykker to get 25% off your first payment for Boot.dev. That's 25% off either your first month or your first year, depending on the subscription you choose. Alright, let's start with the Diablo 4 news. Thanks to a senior product manager on Diablo 4 updating his LinkedIn profile, and then subsequently making it private, we know that Diablo 4 has made over $1 billion in lifetime revenue, with 150 million of that being from microtransactions. Now, we know that within the first week of release, Diablo 4 had already reached $666 million in revenue, meaning in the year since then, it has sold about an additional half of what it sold during its pre-order and release window. Now, some may say, hey, 150 million on microtransactions, when you run the math, that's only about 15% of Diablo 4's revenue coming from the shop. And when you put it that way, it doesn't seem like the MTX is a significant revenue driver for the game. Just, 15%, right? But that's still $150 million. And I bet the profit margins on that are enormous, because it costs way less to make a skin than it does to make an entire game. Again, that $1 billion in revenue is not $1 billion in profit. And with Vessel of Hatred about to launch, I'm imagining we're going to be seeing about 1.5 billion in revenue by the end of the year, if not early Q1 of 2025. Now, speaking past Vessel of Hatred and further into Diablo 4's future, since we could expect at least one more expansion, although while we used to believe it would be yearly expansions, because that's what we heard Rod Ferguson say, he seems to now be walking that back. Seems he didn't mean literally every year, so now I'm thinking maybe every 1.5 years, we'll see. But we know there's going to be at least one more Diablo 4 expansion. And in a recent interview with Game Reactor, lead designer Rex Dixon hinted that we may be revisiting Hell in the future. Game Reactor asked what would be the dream location or biome that they could include in-game after Nahantu's jungles, and Rex said, quote, "Yeah, so I think from the base game, what I remember a lot was going into Hell to fight Lilith. And I think blowing out Hell and returning there is always interesting to me, and seeing more of that world. So I think if we were going to go anywhere, that would be where I would choose." Of course, this doesn't have to be a hint, it could just be him expressing his genuine desire, but I do have a feeling that in Expansion 2, we'll be returning to Old Tristram to fight Diablo again, and we're probably going to descend down into Hell to do so. Just my theory. Now, the PTR for patch 2.0 ended this week, and I wanted to give some final thoughts. Overall, I'm very positive on the new patch, but there's still room for improvement. First off, I'd like to highlight how immensely appreciated the new testing tools on the PTR were. Night and day difference compared to the last PTR, and I think we may even now have better testing tools in D4 than we had in D3, so again, very happy there. The new rogue skill, Dance of Knives. Super fun. It's spin to win. It's even more fun than D3's Demon Hunter's Strafe. It just feels really... It's really fun to use as a skill. Then the new Druid build with the new Druid skill was also a lot of fun to run. Possibly a little bit too much visual noise with all the spamming of that power. The new AFK Earthquake Twister Barbarian is hilarious. The Sorcerer has insanely strong builds. The Necro also has some great and strong builds, but neither the Sorcerer nor the Necromancer really benefited as much as those other classes from the new skills and options. I've got a video showcasing my favorite build for each class from the PTR. If you want more details, do check out that video. Of course, there was some busted and overpowered stuff on the PTR, but that's what PTR is for. It's gonna be fixed. Rob, for instance, found a way to deal so much damage so quickly that the game literally gave up and started showing an infinity symbol as a damage number. That is not a joke, this is literally a thing. It actually started displaying infinity symbols for his damage number. And while that certainly won't be possible on release, it does call into question the stat squish and its effectiveness. Currently, it just feels like the stat squish is really just for pre-endgame characters, and then the numbers start going crazy again in the endgame. Again, leveling 1 to 60 felt good. Using strongholds as a powerful leveling tool felt great. All the quality of life stuff they did that we've mentioned before, obvious wins there. I like the cap of 5 Paragon boards. I know not everyone does, but I feel like there's more exploration of each individual board now, more delving into the rare and the magic nodes, and I feel a decelerating progression in power as you get closer to Paragon 300. That's the max Paragon now. And I think this combines perfectly with the extra long Paragon grind, because you can feel satisfied ending your journey at around, Paragon 200, 225 without feeling like you need to hit 300. In the same way that we don't feel like we need to hit level 99 in Path of Exile or Diablo 2, because, hit the low 90s is enough. You're just going to squeeze out a little bit more power with a few more levels, and you don't really need it. And that extra long Paragon grind gives us something extra for the grinders to do if they want to chase after it. Now, Ancestral drop rate. Oof. With the current systems we had available in PTR, they were too rare. But we did not have access to the Infernal Hordes, which may still have that guaranteed greater affix chest, so I don't know how things will pan out on live servers. Maybe that is supposed to be where we go to farm our greater affixes, but I do have some concerns there. Currently, Ancestrals are the only items that have greater affixes. They're the only items that can have 2 tempers, and they're also the only items that can be masterworked up to rank 12. The best non-ancestral items have lower item power, no greater affixes, only 1 temper, and can only be masterworked up to rank 4. That means the gulf in power between ancestral and non-ancestral is huge. On current live server, I can be content with a non-greater affix item. If I get a really good roll on an amulet, right? Get the right passives. In 2.0, I don't think you can afford to stick with any non-ancestral when you're pushing a late endgame build. And perhaps worst of all is, with this, tempering and bricking is going to feel worse than ever. Your GG items will only ever be Ancestrals, and Ancestrals are pretty rare finds. And bricking means that when you finally get an Ancestral that you need for your build, there's still a good chance that you're gonna brick it. Now, the changes they made to the temper recipes will help. I do like that. A lot of them now only have 3 or 4 possibilities, so that reduces the odds of bricking, but I still suspect that in Season 6 we're going to get more complaints about bricking than ever, because I think that the improvements to the reduction in recipes per manual are going to be outweighed by the paucity in ancestral drops that we're going to get. And ultimately, seeing different complaints here and there, like masterworking is something that I see people complaining about a lot. I personally don't mind masterworking, but I think altogether players are starting to feel fed up with the layers of randomness upon randomness upon randomness, where everything is random and nothing is deterministic. The drop itself is random, the stats on the item are random, the enchanting is random, the tempers are random, the masterworking is random. Now, some of these things make sense to be random, but it gets to a point where it starts to feel like things are being made random just to prolong gameplay, not because the randomness actually makes it more fun. If we go back to the most pure form of the game, right, of an action RPG, you kill monster, you get a drop. It's random, it's a surprise. It's like opening a Christmas present. You don't know what it's going to be. Maybe it's going to be a boring pair of socks, or maybe it's going to be a PlayStation 5 Pro. This is the peak of good randomness. And the more the randomness moves away from that feeling like you're opening a mystery present, the less exciting it is, and the more it feels like it's just there to stop you from getting what you want too easily, and therefore it's just a tactic to prolong your retention. And yes, ultimately, all the random mechanics are there to keep you playing longer, of course, but as long as we're having a good time, then we're not thinking about that. We're not cognizant of it just being a manipulation tactic. Alright, on to rune words. I've seen people have a mixed reception to these. No, they're not Diablo 2 rune words. I still think they're an interesting system and a good addition to the game, though. I like the idea. Right now, it looks like there's basically 2 to 3 rune effects that most builds will be using, which feels like we're not seeing the best version of rune words that we could have. Now, even if those are the rarest runes, the ones that, everyone was using on PTR, the fact that they are tradable means that all build guides are going to be recommending these runes, and they're going to be very accessible to players who trade. So some balancing or something needs to happen here so that we actually make use of all these different runes that the devs designed, because why design all these runes if we're only going to end up using a couple of them? Then, as I said previously, Torment 4 feels too easy at the end game. I was expecting it to be far more difficult, and it just kind of makes Torment 3 feel like a speed bump on the way to Torment 4, just like World Tier 3 was a brief pit stop before going into World Tier 4. I mean, the good thing here is that you're not being locked behind any gear progression, but still, I would at least double, if not quadruple or more, the difficulty of Torment 4 at this point. Again, Torment 4 is not a difficulty that everyone needs to reach. This isn't World Tier 4. Everyone need it to get to World Tier 4 because you can't get the best items in the game unless you're in World Tier 4. Now you can get the best items in the game in Torment 1. The whole point of this difficulty rework, at least seemed to me, to be to let people play on whatever difficulty they wanted to tackle, whatever they felt comfortable with, whatever they enjoyed, while still allowing everyone to get all the same gear, just at a different pace. And right now, there's just no difficulty level for people who want a real challenging game. On a similar note, Penitent difficulty being locked behind level 50 means that early game also doesn't have any really difficult mode. Now I understand, in an ARPG, no guide is going to recommend playing on a difficult mode where you're inefficient, right? ARPGs are games of efficiency when you boil down to them. How do you play an ARPG well? It's by being efficient, by leveling faster than anyone, and that always comes down to not struggling. As soon as you're struggling, you're not being efficient. But still, again, I mean, why not give people who want that more challenging game the option to tackle that more challenging content? Also, people were already on PTR beating pit level 100, which is now the highest pit level in the game. And on live server, it's pit level 200, but pit level 100 on the PTR was much more challenging than a pit level 100 on live. I don't know if it's supposed to be equivalent to a 200, but again, regardless, people were already completing pit level 100 on PTR. On live, no one has done a pit 200, so I think we should just go back to having a pit level 200 as the max level at this point. Because we got to consider that power creep will be a thing. In a year from now, we're all going to be stronger than we are today. It's just natural as you add more systems to the game. Slowly, hopefully slowly, we're all going to become stronger. And if we're already today tackling the hardest stuff in the game with relative ease, then we're just delaying adding more and more difficulty levels. Torment 5, Torment 6, Torment 7, and we're back to Diablo 3. Alright, back to some good stuff though. They've simplified masterworking materials. There's just one material now. Great quality of life change. We don't have to constantly go and convert material, convert material, convert material. They've also removed tortured gifts of living steel, and instead now we just get living steel from the mystery chests as well. Nice change. They've added the ladder bosses as whisper objectives, which is a nice change as well. But the loot from the tormented bosses doesn't seem to be in a great place right now. You get like half a dozen items to drop max, which is a good thing. Having a full inventory every time to have to go back to town and sell everything, that was, you know, the reduction in items is good. However, well, also I think they're always uniques, or pretty much always unique items, which is also good because you're farming these to get the unique items. But they seem to very rarely be ancestrals. It seems they have the same ancestral drop rate as anything else in the game. So you've got to kill a boss like 24 times to get like one ancestral. At that rate, it seems easier to farm mythic uniques than to get the right ancestral unique. Similarly, world bosses still don't feel great, too much effort for too little reward. Blues and yellows are still dropping in Torment 4, even though we're never going to use a blue or a yellow in Torment 4. Can we just have an option that allows our pet to auto-salvage blues and yellows when we tick a little box, right? We don't keep it when we're level 1, but then as soon as we hit Torment difficulty, we tick that box and it's just going to auto-salvage. This way we're not removing them from the game whenever they introduce some use for blues and yellows in the future. They're still there, and you just can decide whether you want to be a player that doesn't want to have to bother with whatever complex crafting those blues and yellows are utilized for, or, yeah, give it to me. Let me see those drops. Pits being a place where you level up glyphs is a great change. Maybe the role of Infernal Hordes can be the catch-all activity where you can get anything. Maybe even glyph XP, just add a reduced efficiency. So for people who are feeling burned out on pit runs, you can get some glyph XP, you know, elsewhere. Or if they just want to, you know, shake it up a bit after an hour of doing pits. Just in general, I feel having at least 2 options to farm any specific reward feels like a good idea to not make people feel forced to do one thing in a game that has so many different activities. But those are my thoughts, folks. I turn the question to you. What are you feeling about Diablo 4 patch 2.0? Sound off in the comments. Then in other news, Microsoft has laid off 650 workers within its Xbox gaming division. That's 3% of its workforce, which Xbox boss Phil Spencer has said was done in order to align its post-acquisition team structure. Now this would bring the total number of workers laid off since the Activision Blizzard acquisition to 2,550. Corporate and support roles are the ones who have been most impacted in this latest round of layoffs. No studios are being closed and no games are being cancelled. The Communication Workers of America, the biggest communications and media labor union in the US, has called this move extremely disappointing given how big and profitable Microsoft is. But that's not the only bad news of the week. Lost Boys Studios was absolutely gutted. They laid off 139 of their over 200 member team. Lost Boys is a studio that provides QA and art support to other devs. They've worked on Diablo 4, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, PUBG, and more. And despite losing the majority of its workforce, ongoing projects are said to be unaffected. Lost Boys is owned by Embracer, which has laid off around 1,500 workers since its acquisition spree, which represents roughly 8% of its global workforce. The company had said its restructuring period was over back in March, but since then they've shut down Piranha Bytes, the makers of Gothic and Risen, those old classics, and now this, so yeah, I don't think restructuring is over. In other news, Sony announced the PlayStation 5 Pro this week, launching on November 7th for $700. It boasts a larger GPU, advanced ray tracing, and AI-driven upscaling. At $700, it does not include a disk drive nor a vertical stand. It'll run you an extra $80 to get the disk drive and another $30 for the stand. Oh, and they've also upped the cost of the controller by $5 for no changes to the controller? Did I get that right? So at over $800 for an upgrade that no current game needs, this feels more like an enthusiast's machine. which is fine. As a PC gamer, I know we have a strong enthusiast market where people will spend thousands upon thousands of dollars just to have the best and fastest machines that no one really needs. Overall, though, it just feels like it's more important than ever for Microsoft to not give up on the console space and try to give Sony some serious competition in order to stop them from getting too cocky. In other news, Space Marine 2 is doing really well. It hit 2 million players within 24 hours and reached a peak concurrent player count of 225,000 on Steam, making it the 40k game with the highest peak concurrent player count on Steam ever. And the closest thing that I see to criticism about this game is that it just doesn't have a ton of content in it. That's okay, not every game needs to be a 500-hour game. It sounds like they really nail the spectacle in this one, which I think is something a lot of games actually struggle to get right. But those of you who have played the game, what do you think about it? Then in some Baldur's Gate 3 news, the devs released official modding support recently. And within less than 24 hours, they already saw more than 1 million mods installed. The official modding kit is a similar tool to what the devs use internally, but with a number of features disabled, and based on Larian's wording, it seems to be due to licensing agreements with Wizards of the Coast for working with a Dungeons & Dragons product. However, it seems features weren't locked down very hard because within like a couple of days, a modder managed to re-enable those features and has now released the Baldur's Gate 3 Toolkit Unlocked on Nexus mods for everyone to use. With this, it seems like it'll be possible for modders to create custom campaigns, alter existing levels and environments, or create their own entirely, and just generally do a whole lot more. Modding is what kept Skyrim so popular for so long. I think Baldur's Gate 3 will now be another Skyrim, living on for years thanks to the modding scene. There's some speculation that Larian deliberately put very meager safeguards in place, hoping that the community would unlock these extra options. A little final screw you to Hasbro. That said, Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro are known to be litigious, so hopefully no one at Larian or elsewhere, the modder, gets in trouble. Then we'll finish up with an update on the Borderlands film. After 1 month, it has exited theaters, having grossed $31 million at the box office on a budget of about $150 million. Ouch. On Rotten Tomatoes, it holds a score of 10% from critics, with a 53% audience score. Oh, Cate Blanchett, you need to get a new agent. Now, if any of you have seen the movie, because I haven't, what did you think? Is it really as bad as they say? Sound off in the comments, because that's going to wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to check out last week's video in which we discussed some Diablo 4 leaks. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my supporters. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to join Rhykkers Raiders for more gaming content.